My name is Chelsea Morris, and for 32 years, I was the reliable one in my family, the problem solver, the peacekeeper, the one everyone called when things fell apart. That all changed at my father's 60th birthday party last spring. After I had spent weeks planning every detail, he raised his glass and called me the family doormat in front of everyone we knew. Something inside me finally snapped. I stood up, raised my own glass, and said 6 words that changed everything. Then don't ever ask me for help again. My mother froze mid-sip. My father's smile vanished. The room went dead silent. If you've ever been taken for granted by the people who should value you, most drop a comment below. Before I tell you how I finally stood up to my father after years of silent service, hit that like button and subscribe. I grew up in Mapleton, Ohio, a place where family values weren't just talked about, but expected to be lived every day. As the eldest of 3 children in the Morris family, I learned early that responsibility wasn't optional. My father, Richard Morris, built his construction company from the ground up, working long hours that meant he was often absent from our daily lives. My mother, Diana, supported his ambitions by maintaining our home and managing us kids, but she was often overwhelmed and anxious about meeting my father's exacting standards. By the time I was 10 years old, I had become a third parent in our household. While my brother Brian, 2 years younger, and sister Tiffany, 5 years my junior, enjoyed relatively carefree childhoods, I was assigned increasingly adult responsibilities. I packed lunches, helped with homework, and made sure everyone got to school on time. My mother's frequent refrain became, "Chelsea will handle it whenever a new challenge arose." "Chelsea, make sure your brother finishes his science project," she would say, or "Chelsea, can you help Tiffany with her reading? I need to prepare dinner before your father gets home." My father's approach was different, but equally demanding. Where my mother asked, he simply expected. The Morris family has a reputation to maintain. He would remind me whenever I showed the slightest resistance to my assigned duties. "You're the oldest. Set an example." Our family dynamics were established early. My father made the rules, my mother enforced them, and I implemented the practical details that kept our household functioning. Brian and Tiffany quickly learned they could avoid responsibility entirely if they just waited long enough for me to step in. When I was 13, my father's business faced a cash flow crisis. Without discussion, my babysitting money was borrowed to help cover payroll. It was never returned. That same year, I began working weekends at the construction office, filing paperwork and answering phones, while my siblings enjoyed swim team and soccer games. "This is valuable experience," my father insisted when I timidly asked if I could join the school volleyball team instead. "Brian and Tiffany need those activities for college applications. You're already set with your business experience here." The pattern continued through high school. While Brian struggled academically but excelled at baseball, receiving expensive private coaching and my father's unending pride, I maintained a 4.0 GPA that was acknowledged with only brief nods at report card time. When Tiffany went through her rebellious phase, skipping classes and coming home late, my parents devoted hours to managing her behavior. Meanwhile, I was expected to cover her chores and help her complete missed assignments. By the time college applications rolled around, there was an unspoken understanding that I would attend Mapleton State University just 20 minutes from home. My father made it clear that out-of-state tuition wasn't in the budget for me, though 2 years later, Brian would be sent to a private university 3 states away with full financial support. "We need you close," my mother explained when I received an acceptance letter from my dream school in California. "Who would help me manage everything? Besides, your father may need help at the office during busy seasons." I chose a finance major partly out of genuine interest, but also because it pleased my father, who immediately saw the benefit of having an in-house financial advisor for his business. Throughout college, I continued working part-time at Morris Construction while maintaining my grades and helping at home. The real inequality of our family dynamic became impossible to ignore during my junior year when Tiffany totaled her new car, a 16th birthday gift, far nicer than the used sedan I had received at the same age. My father not only replaced her vehicle within a week, but hired an attorney to fight her reckless driving ticket. That same month, I requested help with a $300 textbook for an important course. My father suggested I budget better and find a used copy. After graduation, I secured a position at Lakeside Financial Partners, a respected firm in our area. The starting salary was modest but offered growth potential. More importantly, it provided the flexible schedule I had come to need for continuing family obligations. Within months of starting my professional career, my one-bedroom apartment became the family's unofficial storage unit. My parents' garage renovations meant their seasonal decorations needed somewhere to go. Brian's post-college return to our hometown brought boxes of his belongings that wouldn't fit in his new luxury apartment. Tiffany's frequent moves in and out of shared housing meant her excess furniture often landed in my living room. Financial support flowed one way as well. When Brian needed $2,000 for a security deposit, I provided it with a promise of repayment that never materialized. When Tiffany's car needed emergency repairs, my credit card covered it because she's still building her credit. When my parents' anniversary trip went over budget, I received a call asking if I could help out just this once with their hotel upgrade charges. Sunday dinners became a weekly obligation at my parents' house with the unspoken expectation that I would arrive early to help cook and stay late to clean up. These meals inevitably included criticisms, thinly veiled as concern. "Still no serious boyfriend, Chelsea?" my mother would ask while we washed dishes. "You know, if you wore a little makeup and dressed less practically, you might attract someone nice." "That promotion at work not happening yet?" my father would inquire. "Maybe you need to be more assertive. Though I suppose not everyone is cut out for leadership." The past year had been particularly demanding. Tiffany's dramatic breakup with her long-term boyfriend resulted in weeks of late-night emotional support calls and helping her move yet again. Brian's decision to switch careers meant I spent hours updating his resume and using my professional contacts to help him secure interviews. My mother's minor surgery required me to drive her to multiple appointments and manage her medications while still working full-time. Through it all, I maintained a calm exterior while resentment built beneath the surface. Every time I considered pushing back, guilt would overwhelm me. After all, family comes first, right? That's what I had been taught since childhood. The idea of disappointing my parents or creating conflict felt worse than the exhaustion of continuing to meet their endless demands. But as my 32nd birthday approached, with no acknowledgement beyond a group text from my mother, on behalf of everyone, something inside me began to shift. The quiet voice that had whispered "this isn't fair" for years was getting louder, harder to ignore. I just didn't know how to make anyone else hear it too. By early last year, the pressure in my life had reached a critical point. My position at Lakeside Financial had evolved to include managing several major client portfolios, and I was preparing for a presentation that could lead to the promotion I'd been working toward for 2 years. The timing couldn't have been worse for additional family demands, but as usual, my relatives seemed oblivious to my professional responsibilities. Then I met Michael Reynolds at a work conference. Thoughtful, kind, and refreshingly straightforward, he saw something in me beyond the accommodating peacekeeper I'd become. For the first time in years, I made space in my life for something that was just for me. A relationship with someone who actually asked what I wanted instead of telling me what they needed. 3 months into dating, we had planned a weekend getaway to a lakeside cabin. I had requested the time off 6 weeks in advance, arranged for all my work to be completed early, and was actually packed and ready 2 days before we were set to leave. Then Brian called. "Hey sis, I know it's last minute, but I need to be out of my apartment by Saturday, and the guys who were going to help just bailed. I wouldn't ask, but you know I can't afford movers, and Dad's back has been acting up." I heard myself agreeing before I even processed the implications. Michael's disappointment was palpable when I called to cancel, though he tried to hide it. "It's just that this is the 3rd time we've had to change plans because of your family," he said gently. "I'm starting to wonder if there's ever going to be space for us in your life." "Of course there is." I insisted, though a knot formed in my stomach. "It's just bad timing. Brian doesn't have anyone else to help him." "Doesn't he have friends, coworkers? What about your parents or sister?" "Dad's back problems make it hard for him to lift things. Mom's not strong enough, and Tiffany, well, you know how Tiffany is." Michael's silence spoke volumes. "I think you're being taken advantage of, Chelsea," he finally said. "Have you ever thought about saying no?" I defended my family reflexively, but his words stayed with me. The following day, as I helped Brian move furniture into his new apartment, which was notably nicer than mine despite his supposedly tight budget, I caught myself wondering why I was the only one who ever seemed to sacrifice for others. The real trouble began 2 weeks later when my father announced his plans for a 60th birthday celebration. Not a simple family dinner, but an elaborate party with 70 guests at an upscale venue. My mother called me that same evening. "Your father wants you to handle the arrangements," she said, as if it were already decided. "You know how particular he is, and I just don't have the bandwidth with my garden club obligations." "Mom, I have a major work presentation coming up around that time. I can help some, but maybe Brian or Tiffany could take the lead." Her laugh told me everything. "Oh, Chelsea, you know your brother can barely organize his own life, and Tiffany would turn it into something about her. You're the only one we can trust with something this important." Despite my reservations, I found myself creating spreadsheets for the guest list, contacting caterers and designing invitations during my lunch breaks and late into the evening after work. My already limited sleep dwindled to 4 or 5 hours a night as I juggled party planning with my professional responsibilities. The daily calls from my mother added another layer of stress. "Your father thinks the menu should include prime rib now, not just chicken and fish. We need to add the Hendersons to the guest list, even though invitations went out last week. The color scheme should be navy and silver, not black and gold, as we discussed." Each change meant more calls, more adjustments, more of my limited time consumed by a celebration that wasn't even for me. Brian and Tiffany had enthusiastically agreed to help when I asked during a family dinner, but their assistance never materialized beyond vague promises. "I'll definitely help with setup on the day," Brian assured me, though I noticed he didn't offer to take any tasks beforehand. "I'm thinking about what I'll wear more than anything," Tiffany admitted. "Do you think Dad would be upset if I wore red? It's just so much more flattering on me than navy." 3 weeks before the party, my boss called me into her office. Jennifer Walsh had been my mentor since I joined the company, and her expression told me this wasn't a casual check-in. "Chelsea, I've noticed you seem distracted lately. The Westbrook portfolio analysis had several errors we had to correct, and you missed the planning meeting yesterday." Shame washed over me. "I'm so sorry, Jennifer. I've been helping with my father's birthday celebration, and it's taken more time than I expected. It won't happen again." "Family is important," she said carefully, "but so is your career. This presentation could mean a substantial promotion for you. I'd hate to see you sacrifice that for temporary obligations." That night, Michael and I had dinner at his apartment. When I yawned for the 3rd time before the main course was even served, he put down his fork with determination. "This isn't sustainable, Chelsea. You're running yourself into the ground for people who don't seem to appreciate what it costs you." "They're my family," I said automatically. "Yes, and families should support each other equally. When was the last time any of them made a sacrifice for you?" I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it. I couldn't think of a single example. The following day, I attended my weekly therapy session with Dr. Matthews. I had started counseling 6 months earlier for stress management, still unwilling to identify my family as the primary source of that stress. "What would happen if you said no to some of these party responsibilities?" she asked, after I recounted my exhausting schedule. "They'd be disappointed. Dad might get angry. Mom would be overwhelmed." "And how would you feel?" "Guilty," I admitted, "like I was letting everyone down." "Whose needs matter in your family, Chelsea? Who takes care of you while you're taking care of everyone else?" Her questions lingered uncomfortably in my mind. Over the next week, I attempted small boundary experiments. I didn't answer my mother's call immediately one evening, waiting until I had finished my dinner first. I told Brian I couldn't review his latest cover letter until the weekend. I informed Tiffany that I wouldn't be able to drive her to the airport for her girls' trip because I had an early meeting. The results were illuminating and disheartening. My mother left 3 increasingly panicked voicemails about napkin colors before I called back. Brian made a pointed comment at Sunday dinner about some people getting too important for family. Tiffany burst into tears and accused me of not caring about her happiness. The week before the party brought the ultimate test of my endurance. The caterer called with a staffing issue that required last-minute menu adjustments. The venue coordinator informed me that another event had damaged some of the furniture we were planning to use. My father decided the music selection was too modern and needed complete revision. Through it all, I was trying to finalize my work presentation, which had grown in importance after Jennifer hinted it could lead to a substantial promotion and bonus. Michael's patience was visibly wearing thin as I canceled yet another date night to address party emergencies. The night before the celebration, I sat at my kitchen table until 2 in the morning finalizing my presentation, slides between assembling custom party favors my mother had decided were essential just days earlier. By the time I fell into bed, I had slept only 12 hours in the past 3 days combined. As exhaustion pulled me under, a small voice in my mind whispered that something had to give, and soon. The morning of my father's 60th birthday party dawned bright and clear, though I barely noticed the perfect spring weather as I dragged myself out of bed after 3 hours of restless sleep. By 7:30, I was at the Lakeside Manor, the upscale venue I had secured through a client connection at a significant discount, something my father never acknowledged. The event staff were already preparing the space, but there were countless personal touches that only I could arrange. The photo display chronicling my father's life and achievements. The specific arrangement of seating cards that accommodated decades-old feuds and alliances I had been careful to map out. The custom cocktail menu featuring drinks named after his business milestones. By 10 o'clock, my back ached from moving centerpieces, and my feet already protested in the sensible but attractive heels I had chosen to complement my navy dress, purchased specifically to match the event's color scheme. When my phone chimed with a text from my mother announcing they would arrive at noon rather than 11 as planned to give you extra time to make sure everything is perfect, I had to close my eyes and take several deep breaths. My family finally arrived at 12:30, my father immediately surveying the space with a critical eye, while my mother fussed with her hair and makeup in the venue's restroom. Brian and Tiffany strolled in behind them, both looking fresh and well-rested. "The banner is a little crooked," were my father's first words to me, gesturing to the custom sign I had designed and ordered featuring a professional photograph of him in front of his company headquarters. "The lighting in here washes me out," my mother complained, returning from the restroom. "Did you ask them about adjusting the chandeliers like I mentioned?" "Those centerpieces are kind of boring," Tiffany added, poking at the elegant silver and navy arrangements I had assembled myself to save on the florist's setup fee. Brian at least managed a casual "looks good sis" before disappearing to charm the female bartender I had spent weeks coordinating with to create my father's custom cocktail menu. I swallowed my frustration and continued addressing last-minute details, directing the catering staff, and confirming timing with the photographer I had hired. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael just parking. "How are you holding up?" His message was the first indication that anyone had considered my experience today. Before I could reply, my mother appeared at my elbow. "The Richardsons just arrived, and you know how particular Judith is. Could you please make sure they're seated away from the speakers?" And William Henderson was asking about gluten-free options for his new wife. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of problem-solving and peacekeeping. I greeted guests, managed minor catering crises, and ensured my father was properly celebrated while remaining virtually invisible myself. Several of my parents' friends seemed surprised when they realized I was Richard and Diana's daughter, having apparently heard far more about Brian's baseball coaching position and Tiffany's fledgling interior design business than my established financial career. Michael found me briefly between crises, pressing a glass of water into my hand. "You need to hydrate and take a moment for yourself," he said quietly. "You've barely stopped moving since I arrived." Before I could respond, my father's best friend boomed across the room. "There she is, the party planner extraordinaire." It was the first acknowledgement of my efforts all day, and I felt a small glow of appreciation until he continued. "Richard, you lucked out having a daughter with nothing better to do than plan parties." My father laughed heartily at this while I felt my face flush. My substantial professional career and personal life reduced to nothing better to do. As the meal service concluded, the time for speeches approached. I had carefully organized this portion of the event, arranging for several key people in my father's life to share brief stories and congratulations. Brian was scheduled to speak first, representing the family. 30 minutes before the program began, he caught me near the bar. "Hey, can you look at my speech? I just wrote it last night and I'm not sure it's any good." The crumpled paper he handed me contained barely 3 sentences of generic birthday wishes, nothing personal or meaningful for such a significant occasion. Despite my exhaustion and growing resentment, I found myself in a quiet corner hastily rewriting his speech to include thoughtful anecdotes and genuine sentiment that he would receive credit for. The toast portion of the evening began with Brian delivering the speech I had written, receiving appreciative laughter and warm applause. Several guests wiped away tears at the heartfelt conclusion, while Brian accepted compliments on his eloquence. Not once did he mention my contribution. Tiffany followed with an emotional speech about how our father had supported her through numerous crises, from college dropout episodes to relationship disasters and career false starts. "You never gave up on me, Daddy," she concluded tearfully. "You always said I was worth the investment." The words struck like a physical blow. How many times had my father refused my requests for support, telling me I needed to be more independent, more responsible, more self-sufficient? Yet Tiffany's repeated mistakes were worth the investment. My father's own speech was the finale, a 15-minute reflection on his life accomplishments. He thanked his business partners, his golf buddies, even his first baseball coach. He acknowledged my mother's support, Brian's carrying on the Morris competitive spirit, and Tiffany's creative contributions to the family. My name never crossed his lips. As dessert was being served and the formal program concluded, I found myself at a table with several of my parents' oldest friends, including my father's college roommate James. "This is quite an event," James commented. "You must have put in a lot of work, Chelsea. Your father mentioned you handled all the arrangements." Before I could respond with the modest deflection I had been offering all night, my father's voice carried clearly from the next table where he was holding court with several business associates. "Chelsea. She's just the family doormat, always has been." He chuckled, taking a sip of the scotch I had special ordered at considerable expense. "Good thing someone in this family knows their role." The table erupted in laughter while I sat frozen, the words echoing in my head. Doormat. Just the family doormat. 20 years of putting everyone else first. Thousands of dollars in unacknowledged financial support. Countless hours of emotional labor. Professional opportunities sacrificed. Personal relationships strained or lost entirely. All reduced to a punchline about being a doormat. From across the room, I caught Michael's eye. He had clearly heard the comment, his expression a mixture of outrage on my behalf and concern about how I might respond. In that moment, something shifted inside me, a lifetime of accumulated resentment crystallizing into sudden, perfect clarity. I was done being the family doormat. The laughter around my father continued as I slowly rose to my feet, a strange calm replacing the hurt and shock. Without fully planning my next move, I picked up my untouched champagne glass and gently tapped it with a spoon, the delicate ringing sound cutting through the conversations around me. Eyes turned in my direction, curiosity on most faces, amusement still lingering on others. My father looked over with mild irritation at having his audience's attention diverted. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, my voice steady, despite the rapid beating of my heart. The room quieted in anticipation of what most assumed would be another tribute to the man of the hour. I raised my glass, met my father's eyes directly, and said clearly, "Then don't ever ask me for help again." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother froze with her wine glass halfway to her lips, her eyes widening in alarm. My father's expression transformed from confusion to disbelief to the beginning edges of anger. Across the room, Brian and Tiffany stared with identical, shocked expressions. "For 32 years I have been there for this family," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "I have canceled plans, sacrificed opportunities, and put my own life on hold to support each of you." I turned slightly to address the wider room, which remained in stunned silence. What most of you don't know is that I planned this entire event while working 50-hour weeks and preparing for a career-defining presentation. I secured this venue through my professional connections at a third of the normal cost. I personally selected every item on the menu, chose every decoration, and created the photo displays you've been admiring. Returning my gaze to my father, I continued. I've lent Brian over $5,000 that was never repaid. I've talked Tiffany through countless crises at 2 a.m. before my work days. I've done your company's financial forecasting for free for the past 5 years, Dad. The color drained from my father's face as I listed each contribution so matter-of-factly. My mother made a small, distressed sound, but remained frozen in place. I've been there for every one of you, but none of you have been there for me, I said, my voice finally revealing a hint of the emotion churning beneath my composed exterior. So, if I'm just the family doormat, then I quit the position effective immediately. I set my still full champagne glass down gently on the table, gathered my small clutch purse, and walked steadily toward the exit. The room remained in shocked silence, 70 people witnessing the moment I finally stood up for myself after a lifetime of acquiescence. Michael met me at the door, his expression a mixture of concern and unmistakable pride. He said nothing, simply offering his arm as we walked out together into the early evening air. We made it to his car before my composure cracked. The moment the door closed behind me, I began shaking uncontrollably, tears streaming down my face as the enormity of what I had just done hit me fully. I can't believe I did that, I gasped between sobs. I ruined his birthday. I humiliated everyone. I'm a terrible daughter. Michael reached across to take my trembling hands. You spoke your truth after years of being silenced. That doesn't make you terrible, Chelsea. It makes you human. He held me while I cried, offering his steady presence without trying to minimize my emotions or rush me through them. When the initial storm had passed, he gently asked, "What do you need right now?" "Space," I whispered. "I need space from all of them." He nodded and started the car, driving us away from the venue where I had left behind, not just a party but a lifetime of unhealthy patterns. By the time we reached Michael's apartment, my phone was exploding with notifications. I glanced down to see missed calls from my mother, texts from extended family members, and a single message from my father that simply read, "You will apologize for this behavior." With shaking hands, I turned off my phone completely, something I had never done before when family might need to reach me. The small act of self-protection felt both terrifying and strangely liberating. Michael made tea and sat with me on his couch, patient, as I processed the swirling emotions. "I've never spoken to my father like that," I said eventually. "To any of them, really. I've always been the peacekeeper, the fixer." "How does it feel?" he asked quietly. "Terrifying," I admitted. "But also, right. Like I finally said what I've been holding back for years." As the evening progressed, I found myself sharing stories I had previously minimized or excused. The time my college graduation celebration was cut short because Tiffany had a minor fender bender. The promotion I turned down because it would have required travel during my father's surgery recovery, only to find he expected Brian to handle nothing during that time. The countless holidays I spent cooking and cleaning while my siblings arrived just in time to eat and receive credit for minimal contributions. I never realized how one-sided it all was. I said the patterns becoming clearer as I spoke them aloud. I thought that's just what families did for each other, but it wasn't family doing these things. It was just me. Michael listened without judgment, occasionally offering perspectives I had never considered. From the outside looking in, he said gently, "What you're describing isn't normal family give and take. It's exploitation of your good nature and sense of responsibility." The word exploitation felt harsh but accurately named the dynamic I had been unable to articulate. I had been exploited by the people who should have protected me most, my value to them directly proportional to what I could provide. That night I slept in Michael's guest room, borrowing a t-shirt and sweatpants since I had nothing with me. Despite the emotional exhaustion, sleep came fitfully interrupted by waves of anxiety about the consequences of my actions. I had disrupted a family system that, while dysfunctional, had been stable and predictable. What would happen now? Morning brought no clarity, just the heavy realization that I would eventually have to face my family again. Michael made breakfast and sat across from me at his small kitchen table. "You don't have to decide anything today," he said. "Give yourself permission to take the space you need." I've never stood up to them before, I admitted. "I don't even know how to do this." "One day at a time," he suggested. "Maybe start by focusing on your presentation this week. You've put your career on hold for family emergencies countless times. This is a real opportunity for you." The gentle reminder of my professional responsibilities provided a welcome focus beyond the family drama. I borrowed Michael's laptop to review my presentation notes, finding that the distance from my usual environment actually brought clarity to the material. For the first time in years, I worked without interruption from family demands, and the result was noticeably better. Later that day, I briefly turned on my phone to send a single message to my family group chat. "I need some time. Please respect that. I'm safe and will reach out when I'm ready." Then I turned it off again before any responses could come through. That small boundary, the declaration that I needed time rather than asking permission for it, felt like the first step on a new path. A path where I might finally exist as more than just the family doormat. The week following my father's birthday party was the first time in my adult life that I went without daily contact with my family. The silence was both unsettling and strangely peaceful, like the eerie quiet after a lifetime of background noise suddenly stops. I stayed at Michael's apartment for 2 nights before returning to my own place, half expecting to find my family waiting at my door. Instead, I found only my quiet, slightly cluttered space, no different than when I had left it except for the absence of constant texts and calls demanding my attention. With my presentation scheduled for Thursday, I channeled all my energy into finalizing my materials and practicing my delivery. Without family interruptions, I found myself more focused and confident than I had been in years. The work that had previously required late nights to complete now fit comfortably within normal business hours, leaving me with actual free time in the evenings. Thursday morning arrived with a sense of clarity and purpose I had almost forgotten was possible. Standing before the company's executive team and several major clients, I delivered the most polished presentation of my career. Jennifer's approving nods throughout confirmed what I already sensed. I was finally performing at my true potential, rather than the compromise level I had accepted as my ceiling. "That was exceptional work," Jennifer said afterward as the room cleared. "The Phillips Group has already indicated they want to expand their portfolio with us. The promotion is yours effective next month." The success should have been purely sweet, but I found myself fighting the instinct to immediately call my parents with the news. For years, professional achievements had only felt real when acknowledged by my family, however briefly or dismissively. Breaking that pattern would be harder than I had anticipated. By Friday afternoon, I finally turned my phone back on, bracing myself for the onslaught. Over 100 notifications immediately populated my screen, ranging from concerned to manipulative to outright hostile. My mother's messages formed the largest group, beginning with confusion. "What on earth happened? Call me immediately," quickly progressing to health complaints. "My blood pressure is through the roof because of this stress," and finally, settling into emotional manipulation. "How could you do this to your father, to me, after everything we've done for you?" My father's approach was different but equally predictable. 3 days of stony silence followed by a single text, "Your behavior was unacceptable and embarrassing. You will apologize to me and everyone present at the party." Not a question, not a request. A command as always. Brian's messages oscillated between playing peacemaker, "Come on sis, you know Dad didn't mean anything by it," and subtle blame shifting. "You've been super stressed lately, maybe you need to work on handling pressure better." Tiffany predictably had somehow made the situation about herself. "Everyone's fighting because of what you said, and now no one is paying attention to my design showcase next weekend." Beyond my immediate family, the extended network had mobilized. Aunts, uncles, and family friends had sent messages ranging from genuine concern to thinly veiled attempts to pull me back in line. "Your mother is absolutely beside herself," wrote my Aunt Patricia, my father's older sister. Richard may be stubborn, but publicly humiliating him wasn't the answer. "We all say things we don't mean in families," offered my mother's best friend. "Your parents have given you so much, Chelsea. Don't throw away your relationship over one comment." The most surprising message came from my cousin Kate, who had always been quiet at family gatherings. "I saw what you did at Uncle Richard's party. It took courage. If you need someone to talk to who understands, I'm here." After reading through everything, I sent a brief, carefully worded message to the family group chat. "I'm taking some time for myself right now. I'll reach out when I'm ready to talk." Then I muted the conversation before they could respond. Sunday arrived with the strange realization that for the first time in years I wasn't expected at my parents' house for dinner. The habitual guilt tried to surface, but I pushed it aside, and instead accepted Michael's invitation to try a new hiking trail outside the city. As we walked among towering trees, the physical exertion and natural beauty provided perspective that had been impossible to find in the midst of family dynamics. "I keep waiting to feel worse about what happened," I admitted as we rested beside a small waterfall. "But mostly I feel relieved, like I can finally breathe." "That's your body confirming what your mind has been trying to tell you," Michael suggested. "The situation wasn't healthy for you." Monday brought a new challenge when Jennifer called me into her office. "Your father called the office this morning," she said without preamble. "He asked to speak with me about your concerning behavior and family emergency." My stomach dropped. "Jennifer, I'm so sorry. My personal situation shouldn't impact work." She held up a hand. "I told him that your professional conduct has been exemplary and that your personal life is your own business." Her expression softened slightly. "But Chelsea, if you need support, the company has resources." That evening, I finally made an emergency appointment with Dr. Matthews, my therapist. The session was both painful and illuminating, as she helped me unpack not just the birthday party incident, but the lifetime of patterns that had led to it. "What you're experiencing is a normal response to setting a boundary with people who have never respected your boundaries before," she explained. "The backlash is uncomfortable, but actually confirms how necessary the boundary was." "I feel guilty for hurting them," I admitted. "But I also feel angry that they seem more concerned about the public embarrassment than about why I finally snapped." "Both feelings can be true simultaneously," she said. "You can regret the public nature of the confrontation, while still standing firm in the truth of what you expressed." The second week of silence brought escalation. My mother left a tearful voicemail, claiming she had experienced chest pains and had gone to the emergency room. The doctor said it was stress-related, she sobbed. "I didn't tell your father because I didn't want to worry him, but Chelsea, this situation is literally making me sick." My immediate instinct was to rush to her side to fall back into the caretaker role that had defined me for so long. Instead, I called my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister who lived nearby, explained the situation calmly, and asked if she could check on my mother. It was the first time I had ever delegated a family responsibility, and the relief was palpable. Linda called back an hour later. "Your mother is fine," she said, a new note of understanding in her voice. "The doctor diagnosed anxiety, not a heart problem, and it was 3 days ago, not today," as she implied. "I had no idea she put this much pressure on you, Chelsea." That small revelation became a turning point. As I maintained, my distance, cracks in the family narrative began to appear. People who had always seen me as the dependable problem solver started to glimpse the unbalanced dynamics I had normalized for years. The third week brought a more direct confrontation when my mother showed up unannounced at my apartment one evening. I opened the door to find her looking genuinely disheveled, so unlike her normally polished appearance that I momentarily forgot my resolve. "Mom, what's wrong?" "What's wrong?" she repeated, her voice rising. "My family is falling apart, that's what's wrong. Your father barely speaks to anyone. Brian and Tiffany are fighting because no one is there to mediate, and I had to cancel hosting the garden club because I couldn't manage it all myself." I took a deep breath. "I'm sorry you're struggling, Mom. Would you like to come in for some tea?" Her surprise at my calm response was evident as she followed me into my apartment. As I prepared the tea, she continued listing all the ways my absence had created difficulties, each example unintentionally highlighting just how much I had previously managed for everyone. When she paused for breath, I gently said, "It sounds like it's been challenging to handle these things without me." "Of course it has," she exclaimed. "You've always taken care of everything." "Yes," I agreed quietly. "I have. And it wasn't fair to expect that of me." She stared at me as if seeing me clearly for the first time. "You're really not coming back to the way things were, are you?" "No, Mom, I'm not." Something shifted in her expression, then a brief moment of genuine recognition before her defenses reasserted themselves. "Your father will never accept this, you know. He doesn't understand why you can't just apologize and move forward." "I know," I said simply. "But this isn't about what Dad will accept anymore. It's about what I need to be healthy." She left shortly after, visibly unsettled by my gentle but firm boundary. As I closed the door behind her, I realized I had navigated my first direct family confrontation without either capitulating or escalating. It was a small victory, but a significant one. 1 month after the birthday party incident, my father finally reached out directly. The timing was not coincidental. Morris Construction was facing an audit issue that previously would have fallen to me to resolve given my financial expertise. The message came through my mother, of course. "Your father has a small situation with the business," she said carefully during a brief phone call. "Nothing serious, just some paperwork issues with an audit. He thought you might be willing to look it over." The old Chelsea would have immediately agreed, eager to prove my usefulness and earn a scrap of approval. The new Chelsea took a deep breath and responded, "I'm not available to help with that right now, Mom. Dad should contact his accountant." The silence on the other end of the line was profound before my mother recovered. "But you've always handled these things. The accountant charges hundreds of dollars per hour for this kind of work." "Yes," I agreed. "Professional financial services do cost money. That's why I'm paid for my expertise at work." "Are you saying you want your father to pay you?" she asked, scandalized. "I'm saying I'm not available to help," I repeated gently. "Dad has other options, they just aren't free." The ripple effects of my continued boundaries became increasingly visible in the family system. My brother called a week later, his tone uncharacteristically humble. "Hey sis," he began awkwardly. "How have you been?" We exchanged surface-level pleasantries before he cleared his throat. "So I've been thinking about what you said at Dad's party, about the money I borrowed. I didn't realize it added up to so much. $5,430 over the past 3 years," I said, precisely having finally tallied the full amount during a review of my finances. "Right, that's a lot." He paused. "I can't pay it all back at once, but I thought maybe we could work out a payment plan." His offer, while still placing the administrative burden on me to create and track a payment plan, represented the first acknowledgement from any family member that they had taken advantage of my generosity. It was a start, however small. Tiffany's approach was less direct but equally revealing. After several ignored texts about her latest crisis, she showed up at my office building during lunch, creating a scene in the lobby that forced me to either engage or risk professional embarrassment. "You can't just ignore me forever," she exclaimed dramatically, as I led her to a nearby coffee shop to contain the situation. "I needed you last week when Jason and I broke up again and you weren't there for me." "I'm sorry you're going through a difficult time," I said calmly. "What support do you have in place?" She blinked, thrown by the question. "What do you mean?" "Friends, other family members, maybe a therapist who could help you process the breakup." "But you're always the one I talk to about these things," she said, genuinely confused. "And I've been happy to support you," I acknowledged. "But it's not healthy for either of us if I'm your only support system. I have my own life and responsibilities too." The conversation that followed was difficult but necessary, as I gently but firmly established that while I cared about her, I would no longer be available for middle-of-the-night emotional crisis calls or last-minute rescue missions. She left visibly unsettled, but with a list of resources for more appropriate support. Meanwhile, my own life began to flourish in unexpected ways. The promotion at work came with not just increased responsibility but also a substantial salary increase that allowed me to improve my financial situation. Michael and I grew closer, our relationship deepening as I became more authentically myself rather than the perpetually exhausted people-pleaser he had first met. I rediscovered old interests that had been sacrificed to family obligations. A community pottery class I had abandoned years ago welcomed me back. I joined a hiking group that met on Sunday mornings, deliberately scheduling an activity during the time previously reserved for family dinners. Old friendships that had withered under the constant demands of my family began to cautiously revive. Ashley, my college roommate, who had gradually stopped inviting me to events after too many last-minute cancellations, responded enthusiastically to my lunch invitation. "Honestly, I thought you just weren't interested in staying friends," she admitted over salads. "You always had some family emergency that took priority." "I'm sorry," I said sincerely. I didn't realize how much I was letting other relationships suffer. 6 weeks after the confrontation, an unexpected ally emerged in my Aunt Patricia, my father's sister. She called one evening, her tone conspiratorial. "I've wanted to reach out since the party," she began without preamble. "What you said about Richard, about being the family doormat, it resonated with me because he did the same thing to me our entire childhood." She shared stories I had never heard before of my father taking credit for her work, expecting her to cover for his mistakes, and dismissing her achievements while demanding her support. The patterns were startlingly familiar, a generational repetition I had unconsciously stepped into. "He won't change, Chelsea," she said gently. "But you can. I moved 2,000 miles away to break the cycle, but you're finding a way to do it while staying. I admire that." Her validation provided strength for the next inevitable confrontation. My mother called to inform me that Thanksgiving planning needed to begin with the clear expectation that I would host as I had for the past 5 years. "Actually, Mom, Michael and I have made other plans this year," I said, my heart racing despite the simple statement. "We're taking a short trip to the mountains that weekend." The silence that followed was weighted with shock and disapproval. "But it's Thanksgiving," she finally said, as if I might have forgotten. "The family always gets together for Thanksgiving." "I know, and you're welcome to host at your house," I suggested. "Or Brian or Tiffany might want to take a turn." "They don't know how to organize something like that," she protested. "They could learn," I pointed out gently. "Just like I did." That conversation sparked a family-wide reckoning about holiday expectations. After much discussion and negotiation, we eventually agreed that I would attend Christmas at my parents' home, but only if responsibilities were shared equally among all family members. My father reluctantly agreed to handle the main course, my mother would prepare sides, Brian would manage drinks and music, and Tiffany would handle decorations and dessert. "And what will you be doing?" my father asked pointedly when these assignments were finalized during a tense family dinner, the first I had attended in months. "I'll be bringing the bread and salad," I said simply, "and enjoying time with my family without exhausting myself." His expression suggested he was not entirely satisfied with this arrangement, but for the first time in my memory, he did not issue a command or criticism. It was a small shift in our dynamic, but a significant one. As the months passed, a new pattern gradually emerged. My family still occasionally tested my boundaries, but with decreasing frequency and intensity. They began to recognize that my love and care were not contingent on servitude, and that a relationship with me now required mutual respect rather than one-sided sacrifice. Not every interaction was smooth. There were difficult conversations, setbacks, and moments of intense guilt as I navigated this new territory. But with each small stand I took, each boundary I maintained, I reclaimed a piece of myself that had been subsumed by family expectations. And, somewhat to my surprise, most of my relationships improved rather than disintegrated. The connections became more authentic, more balanced, and ultimately more sustainable than the dysfunctional dynamics that had defined us for so long. 1 year after the birthday party that changed everything, I found myself preparing for another family gathering, though under very different circumstances. My promotion had led to another advancement at work, and I had decided to host a small celebration at my new apartment, purchased with the substantial down payment my improved finances had made possible. As I arranged simple appetizers and checked the wine selection, I marveled at how much had shifted in 12 months. The woman who had once been so consumed by family demands that she barely had time to sleep now maintained a successful career, a loving relationship, genuine friendships, and personal interests, all while preserving family connections on healthier terms. My father arrived with my mother precisely on time, carrying a bottle of champagne that showed actual thought about my preferences rather than his own. It was one of many small indicators that while our relationship remained a work in progress, genuine change had occurred. "The place looks great, Chelsea," he said, glancing around at my tastefully decorated living room. The compliment was offered casually, without the critical assessment that would have accompanied it in the past. "Thanks, Dad. I'm really happy with it." As other guests arrived, including Michael, some colleagues and friends both new and reconnected, I observed my father navigating a social situation where he wasn't automatically the center of attention. He seemed smaller, somehow less intimidating than the towering figure who had dominated my life decisions for decades. During a quiet moment when we found ourselves alone in the kitchen, he cleared his throat awkwardly. "Your boss, Jennifer, seems impressed with your work." "She is," I agreed. "The client portfolio I've developed has brought significant new business to the firm." He nodded, fidgeting with his glass in a rare display of uncertainty. "I may have underestimated your professional capabilities," he finally said, the closest he had ever come to acknowledging my achievements. "The company has clearly recognized your value." The word value hung between us, loaded with unspoken meaning. My value as a professional, as a person, as his daughter, all wrapped in that single acknowledgement. "Thank you," I said, simply accepting the olive branch for what it was, imperfect but sincere. My mother had undergone her own transformation, though in a different direction. After our confrontation, she had reluctantly agreed to attend a support group for women struggling with codependency. While she initially went to understand what was happening with Chelsea, she had gradually recognized patterns in her own behavior. "I never realized how much I set you up to be the buffer between me and your father's demands," she admitted during a private lunch a few months earlier. "It was easier to direct his expectations to you than to face them myself." The acknowledgement wasn't a complete resolution of our complex dynamic, but it created space for a more honest relationship that continued to evolve. My siblings showed varying degrees of growth. Brian had surprised everyone by actually following through on his payment plan, gradually repaying the money he had borrowed. More significantly, he had stopped automatically assuming I would handle difficult tasks or financial shortfalls in his life. Tiffany's progress was less consistent but still meaningful. Her emotional crises still occurred, but she had developed a wider support network rather than relying exclusively on me. When she did reach out, she now asked if I had capacity to talk, rather than assuming my immediate availability. The most profound changes, however, had occurred within me. The confidence I had discovered in that moment of standing up at my father's birthday party had extended to every area of my life. I spoke up more in meetings at work, expressed my needs clearly in my relationship with Michael, and no longer felt compelled to say yes to requests that would deplete me. 3 months earlier, Michael had proposed during a weekend hike to the waterfall where we had first discussed the family dynamics that had constrained me for so long. The ring now sparkled on my finger, a symbol not just of our commitment to each other, but of the self-worth I had reclaimed. Planning our wedding became an unexpected test of my new boundaries. My mother initially approached it with the same controlling energy she had applied to family events throughout my childhood. I've already spoken with Reverend Williams about dates, she announced during one of our early planning discussions, and I think the color scheme should be lavender and silver since that would complement the church windows. The old Chelsea would have nodded and accepted these decisions to avoid conflict. The new Chelsea took a deep breath and responded, "Mom, Michael and I will be making those decisions together. We appreciate input, but the final choices are ours." The wedding planning process became a metaphor for my continuing growth. Each decision, an opportunity to practice balancing family inclusion with appropriate boundaries. My father's most significant acknowledgement came unexpectedly during a family dinner 2 months before my celebration party. As we finished dessert, he suddenly said, "I've been thinking about what happened last year at my birthday." The table fell silent, everyone tense at the mention of the event that had transformed our family dynamic. I said something thoughtless. He continued, looking directly at me. "About you being the family doormat." It was meant as a joke, but it was actually rather cruel, especially given how much you had done for the event itself. It wasn't a full apology, but from my father this admission of wrongdoing was unprecedented. "Thank you for acknowledging that," I said quietly. He nodded once decisively, as if closing a business negotiation. "You've always been the most capable one in this family, Chelsea. I took that for granted." The simple truth of that statement, offered without manipulation or agenda, created a moment of genuine connection between us. Not a Hollywood reconciliation with tears and dramatic embraces, but something authentic and appropriate to our evolving relationship. As my celebration party wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself standing on my small balcony with Michael, looking at the city lights spread out before us. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around my waist. "Yes," I answered truthfully. "Not because everything is perfect, but because I finally know I have the right to my own life." He smiled, understanding the significance of that statement after witnessing my journey. "You always had that right. Now you believe it." The path from family doormat to self-respecting adult had not been smooth or simple. There had been painful conversations, difficult boundaries to maintain, and moments of doubt when the pull of old patterns felt nearly irresistible. Some relationships in my extended family had not survived my newfound ability to say no, while others had transformed into connections of genuine mutual respect. The crisis point at my father's birthday party, painful as it had ultimately been a gift. It had forced into the open dynamics that had silently shaped my life for decades, creating an opportunity for genuine change that might never have come otherwise. As I've shared this story, perhaps you've recognized elements of your own family dynamics. Maybe you're the reliable one, the fixer, the peacekeeper who puts everyone else's needs before your own. Maybe you've felt that twist of resentment when your contributions go unacknowledged, while others receive praise for minimal effort. If so, I want you to know that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It isn't cruel or disloyal to expect reciprocity in your relationships. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for both yourself and your family is to stop being a doormat and start being a person with inherent value beyond what you can provide for others. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took you for granted? What happened when you finally set boundaries? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about finding strength through life's challenges. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing this journey, please share this video with them. Remember, your worth isn't measured by how much you do for others, but by the authentic life you create for yourself. Thank you for listening to my story.